Hello, welcome to the Matchbook horse racing review of what was another excellent weekend in the world of horse racing, but it was a classic weekend between Epsom. We also had the Prix Du Jockey Club, which we learnt a bit about as well. Donn McLean joined me, who is the other side of this screen. And Donn, we learned a fair bit. In some ways, I think we were half expecting that Aidan O'Brien might do quite well in the Investec Derby. He sent out 7 in there. Galileo, and I did give the winner a mention on one of these about, what was it, about, I think about 4 weeks ago after he won at Lingfield.
Yeah.
So he's been a little bit of success in there, but look, it was a Galileo again, expected to come on for his reappearance, and he won. And there was a lot of delight for Shamey Heffernan, and quite rightly so.
It was great for Shamey Heffernan, Tom. Like he was in Jim Bulger's when Aidan O'Brien was in Jim Bulger's, so he's been with them all that time. He's been understudy to a lot of very high class and high profile jockeys, but he's always been there. He's had lots of success himself. He'd never won a derby. He'd gone close in the past. As he was saying himself, he rode Fame and Glory, who was favourite at the time. He finished second in the 150 to 1 shot. And yeah, look, it was brilliant for him because, as he said himself yesterday, Shamey did, or on Saturday, when you're riding for Aidan O'Brien, you're going to have a good ride in the Derby. That's just the way it is. And as we discussed as well, you can't know for sure what the pecking order of the Ballydoyle horses is going into the race. And even Aidan O'Brien doesn't know, because you're not going to try them against each other over a mile and a half at home. That's for sure. Well, Aidan O'Brien isn't anyway. That's not the way he operates. So you get there. You get them there as well as you can, and obviously as well as Aidan O'Brien can have them on the day is fairly good, and run them. And 7 runners, 5 in the first 6. It's an unbelievable result for Aidan O'Brien. And we kind of take it a bit for granted, don't we? We're a bit blasé about Aidan O'Brien winning the Epsom Derby, and I suppose when you've done something 7 times, as many as any other man in the history of the race, going back centuries, it's obviously, it becomes a bit kind of, you expect it to happen, but at the same time, it's still, you can see what it meant to Aidan O'Brien to get the horses there, to have the runners, to have the class of horse that he has, to prepare them on the day. And I think, didn't you interview him on Racing TV just before the race?
Interviewed him just before and just after. I sort of didn't really know what to ask him before, Donn, because it's sort of give us a run through the 7, so we didn't want to do that.
But it's a tough interview for you to do, I'm sure. But it's also, you could see in him, he's nervous. It's not like he's going to the Derby going, I'm going to win it. I've got so many runs, of course I'm going to win it. He's very, very nervous, and every you can see every race, every one that he's won, it's a special occasion for him. He wants to go and win it. I'm sure there's pressure. You don't see it on him, but I'm sure there's pressure there from himself as much as from anybody else to go and win it or have his horses run well. But to win it again, to have all his horses run as well as he did, for Shamey Heffernan to ride him, Anthony Van Dyke, yeah, look, it's great. And as we discussed last week, a lot of it's about which horse is going to come on the most from their trial, and whatever horse wins the Derby is probably going to have to put up a career best to win it, and that's what Anthony Van Dyke did.
And there were 2 things that emerged from speaking to him afterwards. One actually was in the press conference where somebody asked Derek Smith, what was more important to the team, Aidan O'Brien or Galileo? And Aidan O'Brien literally grabbed his microphone and said, he won Galileo. And he hammered that point home in the interview we did with him in Racing TV afterwards. And the other thing that was funny, really, that in the press conference, Shamey was asked, do you ever frustrated you don't get a choice? And he said, thank God I don't get a choice, because it's so difficult to pick right. As far as I'm concerned, and I might Aidan picks, and I'm sure Ryan is well consulted, but I don't think it's as simple as they ring Ryan and say, which one do you want to ride? There is a lot of there's a lot of thought that goes into who rides what, I'm sure, and I think ultimately Aidan is the master of who rides what. Now, ultimately, Ryan was probably always going to ride the anti-post favourite for all he hadn't gotten him on the racecourse before, just because that made perfect sense. And look, he ran a great race, but Anthony Van Dyke ultimately had all the stamina required. He stayed on incredibly well, as his pedigree suggested he would. And look, he was, in some ways, I thought it was a really satisfying result because of the fact that he had the juvenile form. And I think sometimes we want that with the Derby, because we want those early clues, and they make their decisions so early as to what horse is likely going to end up a horse to go for the Investec Derby, and they're looking at it really from yearlings. And I quite liked it. We got to follow this horse, follow this Anthony Van Dyke throughout a strong 2-year-old campaign through into winning the Derby.
Yeah, I mean, like, we kind of forget when a horse gets beaten, you kind of forget. Like, he was a top class juvenile. He won the Group 2, the Futurity Stakes last year, and then he was only just beaten by Corto in the Vincent O'Brien National Stakes. He was, I think they were nearly joint favourites for that. It was 11-8 one and 6-4 the other, so something like that. So look, he's got a, he had, as you say, he had a high profile juvenile campaign, plenty of runs, and then, like, when he went to the Lingfield Derby trial, he was, according to the paddock watchers, he was going to come on a lot for the run. He was very weak in the market, and he still won well. And okay, maybe he had to step up again, because obviously it's a trial, it's not the Derby, but he still won well on ground that was probably softer than ideal for him. And he, as you say, he had the stamina. So, but he wasn't a massive price either. You know, he was like, in the end, he was only, afterwards, looking back at the race and watching, he was a 13-2 shot. So he wasn't a massive price. He wasn't really disregarded by the market. You know, he was well there, and you know, you mentioned, a few people mentioned him and put him up as well. So he was a findable Derby winner, for all that he was a little, you know, he wasn't the number one of the Ballydoyle horses. But we've learned through the years, you know, like, it used to be a case of the Treasure Beaches of the world used to go off at 33-1 and 20-1. That doesn't happen anymore. The second and third of the Ballydoyle horses, we now know, or the market now realizes, they have big chances as well. And just because Sir Dragonnet was the number one, and he was on betting and on jockey bookings, as you say, it doesn't mean that everybody knows that he's far superior to all the other Ballydoyle horses in the race.
Just to mention Mad Moon, and it would have been a fantastic result, really, for us. Had Kevin Prendergast won the race, his first runners in the race for nigh on 25 years. But it was fantastic that he ran so well. Ruby Walsh and I were doing paddock on Racing TV, and Ruby was adamant he would stay, and I was enjoying ribbing Ruby, saying he has got no chance of seeing out a 1.5 miles, and shock horror, right, who knew? But he did see it out. Speaking of James Will afterwards, again on Racing TV, who, you know, James has done a lot of work into ground covered, into stride length sectionals. Without going into it all, he would suggest that Mad Moon was potentially emerges as the best horse race. He perhaps didn't get the best trip, and I think Chris Hayes put his hand up afterwards and said he you know, if he could have his again, he might have done it slightly differently. And if they do have a crack against each other in the Irish Derby, for example, I just wonder what price he'd be. He might be interesting, Mad Moon. He ran an absolute cracker. He
did, yeah. And I saw your piece with James on Sunday there, and it's very, very good, and very, you know, the sectional times that James had were great in showing how the race panned out, and more importantly in the Oaks, I think, which we'll probably come on to now. But yeah, look, Mad Moon, I backed him. He ran a hell of a race. We didn't know that he would stay. You could argue the case that he would definitely get 10 furlongs. To get 12 was a little bit of a leap into the unknown. I think Simon Rowlands had a piece on Cadence as well, which suggested that he might stay. So that was all very encouraging. Interesting that Kevin Prendergast said afterwards he didn't really think he would stay, but he did stay. And of course, Chris Hayes is going to say, you know, you finish second in the Derby, you're going to say, of course, you're going to want your time again, and want to, what can you do in order to make up? He was only beaten, whatever, 3 parts of a length or a length in the end. But I think on the day, at the time, he had to ride the race that he rode. Like, I backed him, so I watched him through the race. Like, when Sir Dragonnet came up on his outside, there was a point there, and there was a fraction of a second in which to make a decision, and he made it to go with him. And really, when I was watching it at the time live, I was glad he went with him, because even though there were stamina reservations, you couldn't have given away that ground. Then he would have been in behind a wall of horses. Then he would have had to play catch up. Now, as it turned out, that's exactly what Anthony Van Dyke did. And he won the race. But you can't ride a race in hindsight. You have to ride the race live at the time as it's happening. And, you know, and it's even easier watching from afar when you can see everything that's happening in the race. And I wanted him to go forward, and he did go forward. So I was glad that he did, and then trust the stamina. So then he had to stay, and he and Sir Dragonnet got into their battle. And actually, I think Sir Dragonnet headed him, and he came back again. He ran a hell of a race to finish second. I was surprised he was second, actually. I thought Japan had got up and done him for second place, but he ran a massive race. For all of that, and it wouldn't be surprising to see him going in the Irish Derby for sure. You can, you know, he did stay a mile and a half. He finished second in the Derby. For all of that, I think he could be even more effective over 10 furlongs because the pace he travelled best of all to the about 2.5 furlongs out. The pace that he showed to come from about third last, even after stumbling early in the home straight, to move up on the outside and join the front rank. I think that pace will be seen to even better effect over a slightly shorter trip than it was over a mile and a half. That's my I think the Eclipse is the race for him. That's what I would do. But look, you know, Kevin Prendergast, he knows way more than I do. So whatever he does, I'm happy to go along with it, obviously.
I think that if you compare it to the Oaks, for example, it's not as clear cut. So as say a Max, who I backed in the Oaks, and you know, I think I convinced myself she'd stay and she'd get through on quality, but she ultimately didn't. You know, that it's as simple as that. Whereas if you look at a Pink Dogwood in the race, you know, she stayed, but she perhaps just didn't see it out quite as strongly as Annapurna, who won the Oaks. And you know, that I think that thing at Epsom is. Early on they climb so far, 40 odd meters to the top of the hill before they swing round, but it's that last 12 meters from basically the lowest point on the course and then the rise up to the finishing line inside the last half a furlong or so, and that really finds horses out. It found out Pink Dogwood, I think, because she hit the front, she looked as though she was the winner and she was probably outstayed. But whereas with Mad Moon and Pink Dogwood, I'd still be inclined to think maybe a different track, 1.5, or again if they come on again for their runs, I think they get a 1.5 miles. Maxad as a filly, for me, you know, she's a 10 furlong filly, and I think she proved that ultimately. I think she's very good. She travelled. Pink Dogwood, I'd give her another whirl. Again, James Willoughby was talking about how, you know, trip-wise, sectionals-wise, she showed a lot of speed, and ultimately maybe Ryan did go that little bit too soon with hindsight. But I think she possibly emerges as the best filly in the race for all she didn't win it.
Yeah, no, again, your piece with James on Sunday was great, and James made a good point that, you know, while Pink Dogwood did use up a lot of energy through a hot part of the race, we only know that looking back on the figures afterwards. So at the time, again, Ryan Moore went when he did, and she picked up really impressively, probably a wee bit more quickly than Ryan would have expected that she would. And she went and looked like she went and won a race. She tried a long odds on in running. I think she was 1.01 or definitely 1.03 in running. And, you know, looked like she was going to. So for Annapurna to come back like she did, you don't see that at Epsom. You don't see a horse coming up on the outside, hitting the front, and then the one on the far side battling back. It's a rare thing. So you can understand why she traded so short in running, especially for she's a half sister to Latrobe. So you expected that she would, and we know she stays 10 furlongs, so you expected that she would improve and for stepping up, or no, not improve. You expected she would get a 1.5 miles anyway. So yeah, I think just in the final 150 yards, she wasn't as strong as Annapurna. Yeah, I think 10 furlongs might be her thing as well. It's a common theme here running through my thoughts, and Maxad likewise.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it makes you go. I said this to James. It makes you go, right. She over a 1.5 miles. She was outstayed, and she was outstayed before she saw it out. So she might be a 10 furlong. But just again, a slightly different. Aidan O'Brien he said this. You know, he said you run that Derby again, we might get a different winner, and you run the Oaks again, you might again get a different winner. I think for Pink Dogwood, she's as you say, she's a sister to an Irish Derby winner in the form of Latrobe. For me, I'd go over a 1.5 miles with her again. I think it just how the race run. I know you're inclined to go bring her back over 10, but she wants to be winning races over a 1.5 miles. She did see it out. She was just on that stage, so that would be the way I'd be inclined to go. But I can see what you're saying. She might be better over 10.
Interestingly, the Pretty Polly Stakes that's a race that she could run in for sure, a 10 furlong race. Now she'd have to take on all the fillies. But it's run on Irish Derby weekend, whereas the Irish Oaks is another couple of weeks later. So in theory, she could do both. She could run in the Pretty Polly, drop back to 10, and then also go for the Irish Oaks. So that's a possible route for her. I think Fleeting ran a big race as well. She didn't really have the run of the race. She was in behind. She had to switch inside, and she finished off her race really well. So yeah, I think she could be. She's definitely a horse a filly worth keeping in mind. She won the May Hill last year. She didn't run a race in the Guineas, so she was a big prize going into the Oaks, but she showed what she could do. It's, you know, she was a high class juvenile last year. She's now third in an Oaks, running on third in an Oaks, so she could be maybe a Ribblesdale filly, maybe an Irish Oaks filly as well.
Yeah, another one that you know, sometimes these fillies, and Max had did it. You know, I'm often a little bit reluctant to go for those stepping up from a guineas, but sometimes that's just the way to go. And Annapurna, I can't get really excited about her, and I don't know why. She's just won an Oaks, a fifth for Frankie Dettori, 25 years after his first. Another one for John Gosden. I don't know what it is. I've got this hang up on her that it all worked out well on the day, but I'd fancy the two in behind to reverse the form. And yet I should be singing the praises of this Oaks winner.
Yeah, she's won an Oaks. She was up in the van early on. She was probably a little bit advantaged by the way the race was run, but at the same time, she showed a lot of courage to come back once Pink Dogwood came up on her outside. Yeah, and she's lightly raced. She's a Lingfield Oaks winner. What about Lingfield? They're lapping it all up this morning. The two trial winners have got them from the Derby.
Because you touched on that, there is this sort of purveying sense that you go, oh, the Lingfield one. That's going Lingfield, is it? No, well, you know, when Anthony Van Dyke went Lingfield, I initially thought, oh crikey, maybe he's not as good as they thought. It turned out it was all timing, wasn't it? It was all, you know, Japan went Dante because he wasn't ready enough, and Lingfield one of the later ones as well. That's why Anthony Van Dyke went there. Well, ignore Lingfield now at your peril, Don.
Yeah, but like, you know, and now it used to be a case like the Derrance back in the Sindar, High Chaparral, Galileo era. The Derrance and Stud was the only trial. Then the Dante, which had been a little bit out of favour, came back into it. Then the Guineas, which had been out of favour, came back into favour. And now we have Chester Vaz as well came up. So it's great. You know, you have all these trials, and now there's no definitive Derby trial. You know, not that there ever has been, but there's no one, like, you can't discount any of them. And just because something wins a D Stakes or a Chester Vaz or a Lingfield or any of them, you can't say, right, that's probably a lesser trial. Now, you know, with it's been a while. I think, was it High Rise was the last? I think Kayazi won it. I think High Rise was since then. Was the last Lingfield winner to go and win the Derby. But you know, you can't discount any of them because they're all running in trials. And Lingfield, and as much as the Chester Vaz can replicate Epsom with the tight left-hand turn and the crowd on both sides, Lingfield obviously replicates it. It's as close to Tatton Corner as you're going to get on a race course in Britain or Ireland without going to Epsom. So it's a place where you can go to prepare for Epsom. The timing is good. It's, you know, you can step forward and it can be done.
We need to talk about the Prix Du Jockey Club and in some ways the biggest shock of the weekend that Pershing King didn't win it. I think I was comfortably wrong when I suggested this horse's optimum trip, Don, would be the trip he ran over in the Prix Du Jockey Club. Because for me, he didn't stay. His stride was shortening as he approached the line. He looked a tired horse. He took it up. He showed speed to take it up. Bearing in mind he wasn't ideally drawn and he covered more ground than plenty. But if he stayed, we know he was good enough to win the race. He would have won it. And for me, he didn't. And on his pedigree, I thought every bit. I know he's a Kingman, but you know, there's mile and a half winners on his damn side. I thought he definitely would. In the end, he was outstayed by a son of Siuni. So there you go. But he looked a miler.
Yeah, he did. There's a sentence you thought you'd never say before. Or again.
He didn't get back to Siuni, did he? But mind you, this was 10.5. I'm not bitter. We're all right.
Yeah. I was with you on that side, by the way. I was Sheikh Hamdan the whole way, all weekend. Yeah, look, it was. I watched it live, and I thought he was going to win it. I actually thought, of course, his wide draw was a negative. No more than for Cape of Good Hope. He ran big race as well from a wide draw. But he was a wee bit keen early on. I think Pierre-Charles Boudot, he was keen to. He was anxious just to get him back and restrain him in behind, even though he was on the outside. He didn't want him wider than anything. He was happy after about 3 or 4 furlongs to drop him back and give away a little bit of ground in order to get him in behind horses. So for all of that, he showed, as you said, he showed that pace, won his race. But you know, the winner, Satsas, he enjoyed a very good run through. I wasn't really watching him through the race, but he did, in watching it back, he enjoyed a nice run through the race. He got a lovely toe and he picked up, and look, he had to go and stay and beat Pershing King as a high class horse, and he did. But you know, now it's interesting where we are now with Pershing King, because now he's won a French Guineas. He wasn't overly impressive in winning it. Now he's been beaten in the Prix Du Jockey Club. For all that, he's finished second in the Prix Du Jockey Club. He's run a good race, and if Satsas wasn't in it, we'd have been acclaiming him as a a Prix Du Jockey Club winner, and now he could even step up and trip. But no, I think you're right. I think he was possibly outstayed. For all that, he covered a little bit more ground than ideal, and probably used up a wee bit more energy than ideal as a consequence. Look, he's still a high class horse, and Success is, they seem to like him a lot. He could improve again now, and he could be, the kind of, from a British and Irish perspective, we missed him this season. He was a massive unknown going into the race, and Christian De Muro only got to ride him because I think Christoph Simeon was playing for the Aga Khan's horse. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses now, because he's in the betting now for the Arc. He could maybe even be an Irish Derby horse. It'd be great to have him over here for the Irish Derby. Yeah, and he'd already won over that trip, so there were no question marks about him. And I think Pershing King, they have to drop him back now. I think the point you make, he didn't settle into his race, which didn't help him. But again, that's why early on he looked like he started his race and finished his race like a miler, and that's why they have to come back and trip with him. Obviously, I don't like the fact that he was beaten, because you want these horses to keep winning. We want unbeaten horses to stay unbeaten, but I quite like him now coming back over to a mile. He's been interesting as well. The point, because he's been beaten, he is suddenly, he loses that tag of unbeatable. So I quite like him dropping back in trip. I don't know where he'll go for, but over a mile, I'd be very keen with him. I suppose a little bit like Maxad. I'm not going to give up on her just yet, but back in trip, she wherever she goes. But something like a Nassau might suit her. Just over a trip which is going to suit her best. So I mean, those would be two that back over a more suitable trip I'd want to back. He's such an impressive physical specimen, Pershing King. You saw it even in his races, just the size of him, that lung capacity he's got. He just didn't shape as though he stayed. So I wonder what they'll do exactly, but I'm sure they're going to come back and trip with him. Is there anything else over the weekend that really leapt out at you? We had the Coronation Cup, Donn. We had the Defoe one. That, for all that, I wouldn't exactly get carried away with it necessarily. Or anything else on the weekend? Yeah, I thought Defoe did well. He battled on well again. He looked at Kew Gardens looked the likely winner. Kew Gardens is interesting now. He has the Hardwick option at Royal Ascot. He also has the Ascot Gold Cup option. So either a mile and a half or 2 miles and a half. I think, St. Ledger going to go 2.5. Are they done? Do you think they'll take on Stradivarius? I'd love to see it. Yeah, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Kew Gardens stepping up and trip now, at least to 2 miles, because he just, I think he could be a top class there. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he goes. Although he's still very good over a mile and a half, but I just think he could excel really over staying trips. But look, I suppose it depends on what else. I'm trying to think what else. Well, they got the horse that ran in the Matchbook Yorkshire Cup, haven't they? Yeah. So they've got two in France. They've got Capri as well, who's been a little bit below form this year so far. He was a bit disappointing in the Savile Beg Stakes last time, but I think he might have been mentioned somewhere as their cup horse this year. But Kew Gardens could be as well. He's probably got plenty of pace, but Yates had plenty of pace as well, and look how good he was as a cup horse. And it's such an important race to them as well. Even by the fact that Aidan genuinely watches the race at Ascot, every race, next to Yates' statue. He literally does. He almost stands next to it to watch the race on the big screen, where he watches all the races at Ascot. It's such an important race to them. They're always thinking about that type of horse. And that, you're absolutely right, Tom. And that, it's not a stallion making race. So it's great that it is as important as it is to Coolmore and Ballydoyle and Aidan O'Brien. And look, we saw that with Yates. He was he would have been favoured for the Derby in his year if he won the Darrenstown. He was favoured for the Derby before injury ruled him out. So he was a top class mile and a half horse. But at the same time, they gave him a go over 2.5. He stayed it well. I think that the Coolmore Ballydoyle team got as much of a kick out of Yates winning all those Gold Cups as they did out of anything and any sequence of races. So it's brilliant. And look, Royal Ascot's a massive thing for everybody, including for Ballydoyle and Coolmore. And yeah, look, they do look for a cup horse, so hopefully it'll be Kew Gardens. I'd quite like to see it. One other horse I wanted to mention was Oh Purple Rain, who ran in the Woodcut. I don't think he was in love with Epsom, and it was a funny race because the Mark Johnson horse went so far ahead. I think he might want stepping up in trip. I think he's a good horse, and for all
Charlie Appleby's winner was very good. Pinatubo may well go Chesham. Purple Rain's one I'm going to follow because he was comfortably beaten enough in the end, and not as though he's going to be missed going forward. But he's just one I'd want to keep on side because I think he could be a backable. I'm hoping wherever he shows up, he could be a backable price. And I thought he ran a better race than the Bear result suggested, so I'll keep him on side. Anything else for you, Don, that you want to touch upon?
I was happy for Adnarium that she won it. Like after last year, she was a bit unlucky, and for Tom Marquand as well to deliver her like he did, and like the fast pace suited her. And we know she handles Epsom, but to go and win it, and Richard Hendon's 1000th winner, which is quite incredible. So that was good. And I thought Blue de Vega. Look, you could have 19 eye catchers in the dash, but I thought Blue de Vega ran very well, and he goes well at Ascot, so he could be one. I mean, he's a massive price. He got into a little bit of trouble, as plenty did. Maybe not as many as in normal years in the dash, but he got into a wee bit of trouble. He's good at Ascot, so maybe keep a wee eye on him going back to Ascot.
You're right. I mean, he won at Ascot almost belatedly when he'd shaped loads of times as though he was going to win last year. But he did the same in the dash last year off a slightly higher mark, and I just think Epsom is too swift for him. He's so quick, and he's just, as you say, he wants that stiffer trip to be seen at his best. So stiff 5, I think even stiff 5 could be fine for him. But I agree, back at Ascot he could be interesting. But equally he's going to let you down sometimes, isn't he? He's one of those pull your head up.
He was a very talented horse when he was with Michael O'Callaghan, and obviously now as a sprinter, they kind of I think he finished 3rd in the Guineas, in an Irish Guineas, I think. But so he was nearly a mile of it now. Robert Call back down and sprinting. He's a good sprinter, and he still might have a wee bit in hand of the handicapper. And as you said, like Ascot, we know that Ascot horses for courses there is very important, and also the fact that it's a stiff finish that suits him well. And Zaki, what did you make of Zaki? He looks like a really improved horse since he's been gelded. Yeah,
he's vastly improved. I was trying to get out of Sir Michael Stout what they're going to do with him next. He wouldn't say. He never does. But crucially, I had a rail behind him, so he couldn't shuffle off, which he normally does. And then he started to feel hemmed in and trapped, and was sort of like, "Let me out!" But he's a master trainer, isn't he? And I thought that horse was impressive. I think a strongly run mile may just be best for him. But he was very impressive. Gelding seems to be the absolute making of him. But I just couldn't get out where they're going to go next, because Stout did say he said it's easier with your Group 1 horses because you go from there to there to there. With him, there's a few more decisions to make as to where he goes. So we'll see.
Yeah, no.
To add, Dom?
Yeah, I thought yeah, it's like he does have the option to go 10 furlongs as well, doesn't he? So a strongly run mile at a stiff track, or 10 furlongs where it can be, because he did seem to need most of the mile to get on top on Saturday, didn't he? Like he won it like a horse who, I know he's won over 10 furlongs, but he won it like a horse who could go further. So he's got lots of options. Like he could be a Group 1 horse. He could definitely be a Group 1 contender later in the season.
Yeah, he's improving. It just shows. Very impressive. And I think since he had those bits removed himself to really fill out as well, is because they sometimes relax a little bit more after having their nuts off, for want of a better expression. And then they fill out their frame that little bit more, and they get even more powerful. So there you go. I'm going to use a better expression than that in future, Don.
Maybe more professional. It would be more professional to use a different expression, but you've got it accurately. You've got it accurately anyway. That's key. That's most of it.
It's factually correct, but I think gelding is probably safest. Good man. Thanks, Don. Enjoyed that.
Right up.
We will. I always say what we're going to turn our attention to next time, but I don't even know what's going on next week. But we'll talk about it when it's happened. Don, thank you very much indeed. That is it for this week's Match. We'll catch you again next week. Bye for now.